So, are we ready to begin? Okay. Hello and welcome everybody to this panel session where we're going to look at the question of does Arctic pedagogy matter? I'm Jennifer Spratt. I'm from the University of Aberdeen and I'm chairing the panel session. And in front of you we have got Paddy Ricey at this end from this university. We've got far end, Professor Kirk Anderson from the Memorial University in Newfoundland, which is Canada. We've got Pika Keskitala from Sami University. And we have got Tuomo Suhonen, who is from VATT in Helsinki. So we have got a range of people from across the Arctic and a range of very exciting expertise. So I just wanted to introduce by saying a little bit, just a tiny bit about the thematic network that we come from. The most important thing is the speakers, but I just wanted to say a little bit about this presentation has been organised by the Thematic Network for Social Justice, Teacher Education for Social Justice and Diversity. And this is a thematic network that draws from universities right across the Arctic. So just to show you, we're quite an extensive network, and we've been getting together to think about what is teacher education for social justice and diversity, what does it mean in the context of the Arctic. And the reason we have a network, the reason that we think it's important to have a teacher education network is because we think there are some common challenges for teacher education and for the teaching workforce right across the north. So we think we have to prepare teachers for big contrasts with all of our countries, big contrasts between big cities and small scattered rural communities. We all share some very geographically isolated schools and communities. Typically, the population gets more and more sparse as you go further north. You see that in all the countries. We all share issues around cultural diversity, indigenous communities, cultural traditions, a wealth of different languages. So we have to think about how to prepare teachers for that. And within our countries, we all have socio-economic inequalities. Alongside that, we seem to have similar practical difficulties. We face difficulties recruiting and retaining teachers and teacher educators. We seem to face high teacher turnover rates in most of our countries. And these ethnic, cultural, linguistic differences between teachers and students. So these are the kind of themes that bring us together, and these are the kind of things that our speakers are going to explore today. So the question that we bring to you, the question that we're going to discuss today in the context of the work of that network, is does Arctic pedagogy matter? Now we could just say yes, go home, but I think there might be a little bit more to it than that. I'm going to invite, I said I was going to invite the speakers in the order that they're in front of the slide, but I can't remember what that is now. So I think I'm going to invite you in order down there. So I'm going to start with Kirk and I'm just going to work down the table, I think. So Kirk, would you like to speak? I'm going to ask the speakers to speak for about 10 minutes each, and that'll give us time for questions at the end. I think we'll do all the speakers, and then we'll have questions at the end, unless there's a burning issue that you just have to ask there and then. Oh, let me introduce you, Kirk, before you start. I want to say a little bit about you. So Kirk is he's in his second term as the Dean of Faculty of Education at Memorial University, Newfoundland. Originally a teacher, so following his career in teaching, he's had a university career as an education professor in several universities across Canada, including Saskatchewan, University of Calgary, and New Brunswick. His research areas are school leadership, school effectiveness, and success in Aboriginal schools. And he's a member of the University of the Arctic Indigenous Issues Committee. He's the incoming president of the Association of Canadian Deans of Education, so that's about to start. and Vice President of the Canadian Society for Studies in Education. So,
all right. Thank you, Jen. Hello, good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming. And we're really looking forward to what we're saying, and hopefully I'll say something that's of value to you. To question about anarchic pedagogy, I think it's an obvious answer. The answer for me, though, comes from for whom, by whom, for what purpose? Because there are anarchic pedagogies that exist, but what I assume we mean by anarchic pedagogy is who's the beneficiary and for what reason. And to me, if I think about education globally, and in the Arctic in particular, it's a pedagogy for the oppressed, and the idea is to emancipate people. And education has to be about emancipation and empowerment. It is not simply about employment. If we deal with emancipation and empowerment, employment will take care of itself. I worry about, which is a corporate argument, that what we want to do is educate people so they can have jobs. And so I'm looking forward to what Tumo was going to say about the economy, and because we do talk about work and productivity in the North as well. So a little bit about some of the things we're doing to empower local people for local interests, for Arctic agency, if you will. Now, hopefully I'll get this to work. Everyone's struggling with the technology, so that's, I'll do it this way. Maybe it won't. All right. Just a little bit about where I'm from. I'm Canadian. Indigenous people sometimes will say a land we now know as Canada. Typically, this is the North, and of course, we have lots of people who live in the North. I'm from this place called St. John's, is where I live now, in the far east, southern east of Canada. And some of what I'll say today will refer to Labrador, which is an Inuit-controlled area. Typically, the Arctic weather patterns flow across here, and then they dip down south. So we're in one of those unique areas where the North comes to us. Again, this is where we are, and you get a sense of where Finland is. If we reach really high and wave, we can see each other's hand. So we have two main campuses. One is in St. John's, Newfoundland, which is on the top. The other one's Corner Brook, which is actually my hometown. And it's about 30,000 people, about half the size of Rovaniemi, I believe. So this is why it feels so good to be here. A lot of things are going on in Canada now. We're revisiting our view and trying to reconcile our treatment of Indigenous peoples, and part of that deals with the North. My job as a Dean of Education is to look at what we're doing in our faculty, embrace our work, and see how we can actually serve Indigenous peoples for Indigenous interests. So our mission statement is to improve the human condition through education. So anything we do should be embraced by basically a social justice philosophy, as well as dealing with pedagogy and content areas, but the sense that our teachers are change agents for the right reasons. And when we talk about indigenizing our academy, we're actually talking about making our universities and our campuses and our schools places that are friendly, at home, and supportive of Indigenous cultures, which includes the North. This is the Natsiavut is a northern territory within our province, and it's self-governing, about 3,000 Inuit folks, and we work primarily with them. I'm also engaged with the teacher development project through the thematic network, which deals with more northern Canada through the Arctic Council, which Finland leads right now. So I'll talk a little bit about them. One of the things that relates to actually the economy, since I want to draw on this, is some of the research I've done about education development is if you look, say, in the southern areas of the Natsiavut territory, they tend to perform better on standardized tests than, say, the North. But if you go north, the language and culture is much stronger. And one of the things that historically would be the case, the southern economies and southern influences that would happen mostly in the summertime, they would get as far as where the ice would stop. And then what you've got is a northern economy, and one of my arguments in that paper that I wrote is the reason the culture is stronger is because the South couldn't penetrate as far north as easily. So you actually have northern economic factors that defend local culture, local languages, And the fact that they perform more poorly on standardized tests within the province is actually an act of resistance, that they're able to produce their own goods more, they're able to defend their culture more, so they actually didn't perform as well in schools, which weren't there to support their culture, they were there to put Southern culture. So it's actually a success story, not a failure. So sometimes when we talk about people of different cultures not performing well in their schools, there's two things. One, maybe there are learning issues. Two, maybe it's because the culture is stronger than we think, and it's defending itself. So it's an act of resistance. We're doing teacher education now, we're switching from, say, trying to bring people to our university to do what we used to call northern and native programs, to having community-based programs where we recruit people from the different indigenous organizations and get closer to where they are and try to adapt our programs to their purposes. In this case, we're looking at Inuit ways of knowing, doing, and being. So Arctic pedagogy, if you will, in teacher education. We'll have knowledge keepers come in to share. This is a man working on snowshoes. This is a man with an ulu. And it's not simply about the artifacts, because we'll actually draw in mathematical concepts in this, how this might look like a curve, or how a trapper would look at snow, how wind affects patterns when we're hunting. So you're actually giving people ways of using our curriculum in a way that fits the places where they live. Again, this is a man who's actually a canoe builder, so you're looking at the traditional patterns here. And that we're more learner-centered, which is a good idea for everyone. So there's a couple of our students there. Land-based, we're very heavily engaged in land-based activities. The idea that we need to get our students out on the land again, and this is where we learn. It's an interesting comment that was made this morning at the keynote. I think that a lot of our schools are really concerned with bandwidth. They want good internet so they can show good videos, so the students can look at things on their iPads. When we have this whole world where we can take people out and they can learn the land that they live on, and if you think about environmental sustainability, we had to better start thinking about where we live and what we do. This is our little group. They're doing some work on the land. Resource materials, having relevant materials that are either in Inuktitut, which is the language of the Inuit, or in English, but referring to traditional patterns. People need to see themselves, and they need to be able to produce the materials that they want to see. So again, empowerment. One of the unique things about our program, I think there are 3 languages in Canada that there are 190, close to 190 language groups that were Indigenous peoples in Canada, and there are 3 that are considered fairly viable. Inuktitut is one of them, and that's the language of the North. So we actually have a language training program as part of our teacher development program. Now we cannot teach the language, we don't have that power or that ability, but the Nasiavut, the Inuit government of Northern Labrador, they have a language program that they're using, so that's weaved into our program. So our program is a little longer, and the students, some of them who've lost their language, and Erica said this the other day about reclaiming her language through school. These people, they'll leave our program, and they'll come out speaking conversational in Inuktitut, and they'll work in their schools, and they'll help with the language preservation and reclamation as we go forward. This is the unanticipated outcomes, one of them. The students themselves drew this, and actually is displayed in our university now on our campuses. And it talks about Inuit values, Inuit culture, Inuit spirituality, and it's just a beautiful piece of artwork. And we had no idea they were going to do this, but the idea that together, if we bring people and people together, produce the right information, that they'll start producing things that are culturally relevant and connected to their own worldview that we can share, so they contribute to us. In terms of our graduate programs, just a little bit about, I don't know if anyone knows this, but this is the rock outside the building. I came in today and put my hand here, so I thought I would join us. So we do a little bit on exploration, cultural landscapes, and master's program, ecology and education, perspectives on Indigenous education and decolonizing pedagogies. Canada is in a really strange place right now where in 2015 we had a report from what we call the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And there's an honest effort, I believe, in our country by many people to understand that we have people who are regionally settled in Canada, and then we had a European migration and a very strong colonial time that did a lot of damage. And what we want to do now is reconcile it. We understand that no one's going home, that we all live there, it's our home. But we want to respectfully acknowledge what was done and go forward together. But that means respecting and repairing what we can. I just wanted to share this with you because it strikes on my heart a little. It's fairly recent, and I guess to some of the historical artifacts. This is a friend of mine who's a Mi'kmaq author. Mi'kmaq would be what we typically call a First Nations group, largely in Eastern Canada. And as a boy, I was raised when I was in my grade 4 class, and my ancestry is Mi'kmaq. And I was told then by my teacher that there are no native peoples in Newfoundland. There was the Beothuk, that's another group. They were extinct, but they were killed off by the Mi'kmaq, who were supporting the French against the British. So we call it forced invisibility, that we learned not to say anything about our culture. Because we are actually, being at 10 years old, I was told we were guilty of a genocide, basically. When it's not true, it's a false narrative. And it was, now and we have had some people today who still repeat that story. So we had to correct our history. We had to get the facts correct. I think there are 500,000 people in my province. As a 10-year-old, I was told there were none. Now there are 100,000. Where did they come from? Anyway, so we're repairing some of the damage. This is Bob Bartlett is a Newfoundlander who was an Arctic explorer. He carried Admiral Perry to the North Pole. So like the Sherpas, a lot of Newfoundlanders would put people in interesting places, but hold back the picture. So this is a portrayal of what the Inuit would have when they first met Europeans. This is what they would have seen. And one of the comments they made was how they felt that the Europeans were poorly prepared for the North. They wore clothes that wasn't very warm. They didn't wear furs and things like that. So it's an interesting backdrop. More recently, this is a ship called the Kyle. We had a large fleet of ships around Newfoundland and Labrador before we joined Canada that serviced our outports and communities. And ships like this would go into northern ports and pick up Inuit children and bring them to schools in more centralized locations. And I really like this story because it talks about the view of one of the captains of that ship when he's picking up Inuit children. I'll read it to you. Yesterday, the Labrador Inuit, okay, this is actually a couple days ago this happened. We joined Canada in 1949, and because we joined after 1949, there was an apology to all Indigenous peoples for the wrongdoings. But because we joined in 1949, we were excluded. The Prime Minister of the day felt that because we weren't part of Canada in the 1920s, we weren't owed an apology. And actually, there were still court cases in our province. Prime Minister Trudeau just recently repaired that. He went to Labrador and apologized to Indigenous peoples there. And this is fairly recent. So this is a story from Maura Henderhan. What she says is, yesterday, the Labrador Inuit finally received a long overdue apology from the federal government for residential schools. Captain Earl Windsor of the Kyle remembered carrying Inuit children to the residential school in Northwest River. He said, they brought all the children out. Imagine, it's a very rural place. The ship comes in the harbor, and the Inuit come out in boats, and they actually have their band instruments. And they're singing, and they're upset. So Captain Earl Windsor of the Kyle remembered carrying Inuit children to the residential school. The Inuit, he said, brought all the children out. There were 7 of them and one little one. One child, getting out of the boat, nipped his finger, and someone bandaged it up. As we weighed anchor and steamed away, which boat anchor and you leave the port, the children were screaming and crying. The Eskimo band was playing, circling the boat and playing their old hymns in that. This is what the captain is saying. So I brought the ship to full speed ahead, and I went to the other side of the bridge and just wept. I placed myself in a parent's place and went back to a child and placed myself in their place. What a heartbreak. Departing from their mother and father, it's a cruel thing to experience, but it happened all the time. So even this captain, a rugged male white captain of a coastal vessel, was crying. In fact, that he took an Inuit family or helped take an Inuit family away from their village to take them to a southern residential school. This is our little group. We have high hopes for them. One of the things that we pitch, and these are Inuit students. One of these things, Inuit student teachers. One of the things we pitch is the role of allies. This is not simply about Indigenous people or Northern people. We all have a role. It's about all of us. So we need to join and partner. And this is what the reconciliation piece is for Canada. So that's my story, a little ramble, but I know. But I just wanted to share that with you, and I'm looking forward to more stuff and questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Way of setting the scene for what lies ahead. That really gave us a really great insight into the work that you're doing. Let's come on. You've got some slides here. Yeah. I'll introduce you while you're getting the slides. So this is Tuomo Suhonen, and he's a senior researcher at VATT. I'm told that everybody in Finland will know what that stands for. Perhaps not. But anyway, you work in labour markets and education, so that is interesting in terms of what Kirk was saying. And your research subjects include individuals' higher education choices, and the return on education, and intergenerational mobility, which is all very relevant. So you've got your PhD in economics, 2004 at the University of Jyväskylä. That's what I'm saying. And where he's an economics researcher. So welcome, and we look forward to your talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So in this talk, I was going to talk about educational access in sparsely populated areas. That's one of my research topics. Basically, I have looked at how geographical access to higher education affects individuals' choices. And but I was not going to talk only about previous research, but just for your entertainment, I'm going to also show some results that I only got this week. It's a brief kind of case study of the Finnish Lapland, about how the educational access has evolved in this region, and how the people in Lapland look like compared to people from other regions in Finland. But first I talk something about previous research. Of course, when we talk about geographical access to education, it's quite obvious that when we talk about primary and secondary education, it's important that people have education close by their region of birth or childhood region. This is important for equality of opportunity, of course, because people cannot choose their residential location. Their parents do that for them. But when we talk about higher education, it's not perhaps that obvious that we should, for example, offer higher education in very sparsely populated areas, because when individuals make higher education choices, they are already adults and can move and they are mobile and independent. But when we look at what the research says about the effects of geographical access, it seems that distances or geographical accessibility in more broader sense affects educational choices. It can affect participation in education, post-compulsory education. It certainly affects the choice of institution. So further the institution is, the lower your probability of choosing that institution is. And perhaps a little bit surprisingly, it can also affect the choice of field of study. For example, in Finland, university education in certain fields is not available in every university, and so the distances to different fields actually vary. And in my paper, which was published a few years ago in Spatial Economic Analysis, I find that distances seem to affect also the choice of field. Well, I must point out that not in all studies, not every study finds kind of significant effects of distances, but this is maybe because the geographical structure of education system is very different in different countries. For example, in Britain, Gibbons and Vigneault don't find effects on participation, but that might be because actually Britain is not very sparsely populated region after all. So the distances are already quite short there. Well, on the other hand, when we look at differences between educational institutions, at least in Finland, they don't seem to be very significant when we talk about students' later outcomes, when we talk about students' performance and labor market outcomes, for example. Choice of educational institution doesn't seem to matter that much. That is my conclusion from our research. So in that sense, at least in Finland, expanding higher education or post-compulsory education to sparsely populated areas seems to have been kind of successful way. Okay, but then I will go to the case of Lapland, and I found it interesting to study a bit the history of Lappish school system. The history is quite old. The first educational institution was established in Lapland already in the 17th century. But actually the expansion of education started really in the late 19th century, which happened also in the rest of Finland. This was shortly after the elementary schooling law was introduced in 1966. My interpretation is that actually the development of Lappish schooling system is not that much different from development in other Finnish regions. It has kind of in Finland there has been these kind of regional policy elements in decision making, and this has helped Lapland a lot also in education. And in the early 20th century, the vocational education started to expand in Lapland. They got many kinds of vocational institutions by the middle of the 20th century: teacher training schools, general vocational schools, commercial schools, technical schools. And one interesting feature in the Lappish history is that actually the comprehensive school reform was which kind of created this modern 9-year comprehensive schools in Finland. It actually was first implemented in Lapland, and then in 1972, and then this reform was implemented in other regions during the next 5 years after that. And also, Lapland was lucky to get a university in 1979, so this was not that much later after the kind of general expansion of higher education that took place in Finland. And also there were polytechnics established in the 1990s. So very significant expansion of education. And this is the kind of current situation. We can look at how many different kind of educational institutions are in different municipalities, and we see that in all of the municipalities of Lapland there are comprehensive schools, and almost all of the municipalities there is general upper secondary school. When we look, actually these figures on vocational schools and polytechnics and universities are a little bit misleading, because these only take into account the kind of main site or main campus. So actually these are available also in the other municipalities than in this table. But anyway, in total there are 152 educational institutions in Lapland. And we can compare the kind of geographical structure between the northern and southern Finland, and it of course looks a little bit different. So the density of schools is not that high in Lapland compared to the southern Finland. And well, of course, it's the case that higher education is concentrated in this kind of biggest cities, Rovaniemi, Kemi, and Tornio. So the distances from these more remote regions are quite large still. And I did some analysis on the educational attainment level of people who were born in Lapland. So I have used full population registered data from Statistics Finland. I've not only used this data for this analysis, but I use it in many analyses. So it's quite simple to compute these kind of statistics regarding also Lapland. And what we see here is the basically type of the highest educational degree at age 35 for different cohorts. And the left figure is for people born in Lapland, and the right figure is for people born in other Finnish regions. And these figures look pretty much the same, as you can see. So there are not significant differences between people born in Lapland and other regions. So it seems that the Lapland is quite equal with respect to educational access. I also done some regression analysis. We can look at how people born in Lapland differ with respect to post-compulsory educational attainment and university education attainment. We see that actually the people born in Lapland actually have a higher probability to graduate from post-compulsory education than people born in other regions. And we can also look at, we can compare Lapland to each individual region in Finland, and we see that these minus signs indicate that this particular region is actually kind of disadvantaged versus Lapland. So actually many regions seem to be disadvantaged in comparing to Lapland. I've also checked how the results change if we control for individuals' parents' education and income. So kind of how, to what extent family background explains these differences, and they seem to explain to some extent. For example, if we just look at the raw data, people born in Lapland have a lower probability to graduate from university education, but this seems to be entirely explained by family background characteristics. So Lappish people are different from others with respect to family background. And I also did some analysis about the situation of kind of language minorities in Lapland. So here we can see the educational attainment among Finnish speakers and Swedish speakers, and among people whose mother tongue is some other. So in the data, I'm not actually able to. The data doesn't tell the actual first language of these language minorities, but I suspect that many of these are Sami people. They must be Sami people. So we see that actually these language minorities are disadvantaged with respect to educational attainment. They have a higher probability to have only compulsory education at age 35 compared to Finnish and Swedish speakers. So there's quite a big difference in the probability. And well, they have also lower probability to graduate from it's basically higher education, tertiary level education. That's what I find. And actually, maybe I will now conclude that. So it seems that geographical accessibility matters, and in Finland we have been quite successful in kind of ensuring accessibility in education in Lapland, and the Lappish people look very similar to people who were born in other regions. That's my conclusion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. And it's interesting to put some statistics onto some of the experience that we've discussed. And the points you make about a language minority within the education disadvantage, again, speaks to what Kirk was saying about the reasons for that. And so I think those two presentations sit very nicely together. So, Vika, can I ask you to come up next? Are you using slides or not? So, Vika Kespitalo is an associate professor at the Summer University of Applied Sciences in summer education, and she works with culturally meaningful education. She leads the Sami Education Masters Programme. You must correct me when I'm wrong. You're the leader of the Sami Education Framework Group in Norway 2016. So you researched and published in Sami school history, Sami education. You've got a book to be published shortly, is that correct? A book about to come out, so you'll have to look out for that. And you're docent at University of Helsinki and a researcher and supervisor here at the University of Lapland. So lots of things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Pekka Keskitalo and I come originally from Utsjoki area, in the northernmost municipality of Finland, from there. And I was the first one age group in 1979 who started in Sami speaking class in Finland, then with new Sami also. So that memory was very motivating. I was waiting school start whole summer because my father was a teacher and he told that this is a very new situation for Sami people. So since that we had in Utsjoki this primary school education in Sami, but afterwards system changed a bit. And nowadays, again, the school law is better. It is supporting Sami language in the Sami areas quite well in primary school education. But when it comes to outside that area, so the situation is really challenging because 75% of Sami-speaking children are now living outside that core area where the Sami language is. So it means that assimilation is really going very speeding a lot. It's really dangerous for Sami language because it is not supported. And I've heard that situation is not changing, so it is now challenging to find out other ways. One way is, of course, to work hard to get teachers. For example, in Rovaniemi, there are 40 children teaching now, and also this distance learning is coordinated by Sami Education Center, but it's not official, as I know. So there's still a lot to do. And I have been working with culturally relevant education. I have been researching both in Norway and Finland, and made interviews and observed education, both what is happening in Norway in Norwegian language and in Sami, because in Norway there has been functioning from 1997 Sami school system with Sami curriculum. So the school system is multi-plates, both Norwegian, Sami, bilingual. Municipalities can choose by themselves what kind of school system they want. And for example, in Tana municipality, there is working both Norwegian Sami school and Sami school in the same area. They are maybe located 100 meters away. Yes. So one of the themes has been also that I have researched school grades and also made interviews of what do these children think about school. So this school grade research was it gave a big picture that is quite challenging, because there are these lower secondary school kids, for example, these Sami-speaking boys who are making 1.5 degrees lower than the others, and it is of course very challenging for those who are choosing already quite early that they are staying in their traditional livelihoods, and maybe they have got some kind of ready systems there that families are already working with reindeer or fishing or something like that. I think the situation for them is quite well established. But there are also boys who are trying to go to schools in Sodankylä, nearby the village in Rovaniemi or here, and it is a situation that they are not coping very well in general level. Maybe they quit the schools and they don't get the final grades, or then something happens and they start to drink and then get other problems. So these kind of groups are the groups that we have to be worried about. And after these kind of results, we have been trying to think that how should the school actually function, and what we have to do that we are giving better future for these kids, for all kinds of kids. Sami people in general, they do also very well. They get university degrees or do very well in their lives, but there are these other groups who are not doing that. And then right now our suicide level is quite high. Okay, so it means that there are quite challenging systems, and school might be also one key, or is a very important key factor. When I was interviewing boys about their school experiences, they said that unfortunately they are feeling like that they are not doing very well there, because teachers are supporting things that promote maybe academic skills, but not their own skills. They said that, well, I might want to go to make a fire to woods and teach everybody else, because I can't do that, or I can go and make some food in the lab with a tipi or anybody else, because I can do that. but they never actually did that. So these kids didn't get this kind of support for their motivation. So they lost actually finally motivation in school because they felt that everything else is happening outside the school, not in the school. So what we really need to do then at schools, in general level, I think Sami education means schools that are located here in these Arctic areas and are connected to somehow to Samihood or something like that. We know that Samihood is not an obvious thing. The limits between these kind of ethnicities are not obvious. So we need to work in the field quite sensitively. And think despite that that education needs to suit for everybody. Like that, we don't need to think about Sami boys generally, but boys living in these Lapland areas or in Scandinavia, northern areas as well. This picture is about what are the frames about Sami education, that we are living in liminal situation in many countries and also in many different systems, school systems, and in many different language systems and cultural systems. So liminality is one kind of explanation where teachers and educators should be aware of. And also multiple situation or multilingualism or multicultural, transcultural context is also explanation that I think in countries where Samis have been living, it has been a long, like, very obvious thing that that it is Finnish school system and it is Swedish school system and it is Norwegian school system and it is Russian school system, but we have not realized that there are also in every country old minorities that we should take care of, and also this indigenous perspective. So multiculturalism is one key solution to these kind of things in general in education also, but in this Arctic area. And then we are talking about this what is that in English? Limited self-determination. Yes, I put this in Sami because I want to show that we really work in Sami situation. So limited self-determination means that states are really putting the frames and Samis are following the curriculum frames and goals, and also that actually they have been negotiating about their goals, but it is not so easy to then in state level to change a system like that in Finland. The fact is that we need to change the school law in order to get the teaching functioning in towns like it is needed now. But in local level, of course, teachers and schools are able to work as they can. And also, we are talking about this colonization. It is different kind of colonization as Samis have been, we can say, many thousand years connected to other people here in this area. So colonization in that sense is different, but colonization is very, in that sense that state borders are put and they have changed, and wars and things like that has changed. So this the situation quite heavily many times. For example, World War II was very affecting as as there were people who moved away from their areas, and then also Lapis war destroyed all the buildings, and also the people were moved to Sweden or to meet Finland. And in the heart are the things that we should be aware of, like the curriculum. In Norway there is functioning own Sami curriculum. It is in the same level as Norwegian, and the school system is also in the same level. That is one part which should be developed also in Finland, and also these language perspectives are important. And I think that we need to also remember in the University of Lapland this language perspective, that we cannot stop to teach Sami language here. It's not the economical reason to stop because of the history, and we cannot say that there is not so many students here that it is not economically worth of that teaching. But indigenous perspectives should be taught to everybody in the university, and I know that now that the situation is maybe not functioning as well as it should. And then we are talking about this kind of cooperation that is very, very in many levels happening, that kind of cooperation. And think about that, without cooperation we are not successful. So we need to remember that all the time and try to negotiate and solve our things together. I think that is very, very important. But I know that it is not easy because, you know, when people come from that background, that they have got different kind of historical situations there. So it is not easy to jump from that role to that role that you are really taking charge. And then I was talking about this culturally relevant teaching methods and things like that. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And I think a lot of what you say speaks to the things that Cliff was talking about. You could imagine some of the land-based education that we talked about there would be very relevant to the situation that you're talking about here. So thank you very much. And very interesting. And would you like to use the slides?
So I think this could be.
Yes,
It's such a beautiful slide. So.
Let me say for the actually then.
Yeah.
So this is Pipey Rassi, who I think we all saw this morning at the keynote speech. Yes, so we'll just introducing her. And you're an associate professor of education here at the University of Lapland, the type of docent in media education. And you're in the Centre for Media Technology within the School of Education here. So Pipey is the chair of the Finnish Society of Media Education, interested in collaborative learning environments, and got a long list of research interests, including videos, ICTs, digital media in teaching and learning, online learning, e-learning, mobile learning, blended learning, higher education pedagogy, and also some work with older people's digital competence as well. So quite a lot of different issues. So I imagine we're going to hear something to do with digital learning in the Arctic context. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm all digital, I guess.
Yes.
Yes. Well, my answer, first of all, to the question that does Arctic pedagogy matter is, of course, yes. 100% yes. But I'm looking at it from the perspective that I think that as educators, our starting point always has to be the student's life world, whatever that is, whether it's a Sami people's life world or someone's life worlds living in the big city of Europe, but it's always our starting point. So that's why I think that the answer to that question is definitely yes. But more specifically, why I'm here today is not because I would be any kind of an expert on Sami pedagogy or perhaps even Arctic pedagogy, because I think no one has actually even defined it yet. We are looking for it at the moment, I think. We're trying to find content for this umbrella concept called Arctic pedagogy. So we're heading towards that direction. But this does not mean that there hasn't been Arctic pedagogies performed in practice. But I think that the umbrella concept needs more specific definitions, certainly. So my point of view or my framework would be to ask, can we do anything with digital technologies to support Arctic and Sami pedagogy? And that's, I think, why I'm here today. And more specifically, because we have an ongoing project, and we have other persons from that project here as well. We have Pekka, who I have been lucky to collaborate with in this project. And we have Ilmari Moilanen, who's the project manager of this project. So it's a project coordinated by the Sami Institute of Education in Inari and other parts as well. And the aim is to promote Arctic pedagogy, especially with the use of modern media and media technologies. And that's why within this project, we have been collaborating with Pekka, who is an expert on the Sami pedagogy. And then again, me, who is expert or something like that in the field of media education and media pedagogy. And believe me, I think this is what I think that the university should be more involved in. That people who have not got the Sami background do collaborate with people who have the Sami background. At least this is my experience. And I felt that I've learned such many things from the collaboration. And I think we should have more of that kind of collaboration. But as to the digital technologies, yes, they matter, I think, for promoting Arctic pedagogy. And especially our starting point has been to find ways and places to use digital technologies in teaching and learning so that it could promote the life worlds of students, so that it could promote conquering the long distances and the sparse population, and so that we could promote people's connections to the Arctic nature, so that we could promote the Sami livelihoods and the Sami cultures. So that would be the starting point to use any kind of technologies. This all sounds like great and fancy and general, but what is it that we actually have done in this project? It is a European Social Fund funding project, which means that it really has to develop the practices locally, and it has to make a difference. So far, and the project is still ongoing and for the next year, part of it, we've been experimenting, for instance, with the students' own video productions, so that we've tried to promote a way of students to learn about their culture, their livelihoods, and their life worlds through producing videos about it. And the idea is that the video material produced by the students will later on work as learning material for other students wanting to learn about Sami livelihoods and Sami culture, etc. So the idea is that the role of the students is not a passive recipient of video materials or any kind of digital materials, but rather an active role of the producer of the materials. So you produce video materials from your surroundings, from the culture, from the livelihoods, and that material can be used as learning material for other people. That's just one example of how digital technology can be used to promote the connection with the life world. Another one, I think, one that comes straight into one's mind is that we can use technology to overcome the distances. And within the Sami Institute of Education in Inari, Finland, there's plenty of examples how Sami language and Sami culture can be taught wherever in the world through the internet networks and digital platforms. So that, I think, is the most clear example what we all have perhaps experienced, and we know a lot of examples about that. Also, within the vocational training world, there's a growing interest of students to model and document their learning processes. So for instance, if you're doing Sami handicrafts, if you're learning Sami handicrafts, the trend is more and more to model that and to report that through different kinds of digital media, pictures, videos, 3Ds, everything, so that the process is visible to those people who you want to tell about the process, whether they're students or other people. So I think that in a way, I see technology also as an opportunity to tell the world about the things that we do within the Sami culture or in an educational institution. Report and tell would be one of the functionalities as well. Well, I'm a digital enthusiast, so I see a lot of potential there, and I'm looking forward to working with this project in later phases as well. And we're trying to get more funding for this so that we can continue and we can integrate research in there too, in a better way. So that's the direction that we're going to take. Thank you. This was.
Yeah, that's lovely, thank you. Now, I'm very much aware that because this session started a bit late, we're a bit squished for time in terms of getting questions, but I think perhaps we might overrun by a few minutes if there are a few questions that people would like to ask. So has anybody got any questions, either to an individual panel member or to the panel as a whole? Yes?
I'm speaking from my friend. I'm not that clever actually, but she wanted to mention for Tuomo that there is one big part of the information lacking from the list of schools. It's this catechist school, traveling schools that was working for over 100 years, and it was a bit culturally based and in some language.
Actually, it was mentioned
okay.
on the slides.
Okay.
I'm aware of these kind of circulating schools. They were the kind of main form of schooling. Yeah.
So what do you call that in English? What is it in English?
Catechist.
Catechist. Yeah.
And do they still exist, or is that something historical?
Actually, I don't know. Do they exist?
I think it's history.
Yeah, I think they were close to the
1954. No, but formally part of the history here. Yeah. No, yeah. Okay. Yes.
Thank you so much. It was so interesting. I'm still from the University of the Arts, Helsinki. We have Sibelius Academy, FERA Academy, and Visual Arts Academy. And we are very interested to cooperate. What would be the role and what is the very important role of the arts expressing their lives and telling their stories. And especially I want to thank Professor Andersson about your lovely episode about Eskimo band playing this human, because it's so fascinating to explore the arts and what is the culture and the culture of their own in Canada region. It was so lovely, and also here in Finland, one of our most previous operas, being an opera telling about Sami people. It's about the composer Armas Lauris and about Aslan Hetta. It was in 1942, and it's so fascinating to collaborate with this media and culture and all these aspects you mentioned. Thank you for great presentations.
Yeah. Would anybody like to respond to that?
One of the things with art is it's so distinctive to a culture. And one of the issues, I guess, for Indigenous peoples is to maintain ownership and control of their imagery, their artwork. And one of the things I'm fascinated by is we're doing more work now in the Canadian Indigenous Association on environmental sustainability as part of teacher education. And one of the people that's leading that is actually an art educator. So she's using art to defend the environment in terms of sustainability. So, and I'm going to say couple little things. The thing about culture in all of us, there are three levels of culture. One is the images, two is what we write and say, and three is that emotional connection. You know? And art brings that out in all of us. You know, we feel things, and until you trigger the feeling part, there's no real change. So I think it's key.
And I think it's also interesting that when cultures have been oppressed, quite often their art has been oppressed or has been not permitted, isn't it? And so one of the ways in which cultures are marginalised by not allowing themselves to express themselves through art. So it is a very powerful thing. You're right. Any other comments from the panel? No?
Well, certainly we would love to collaborate. For the, maybe we could, yes. Yeah, sounds great. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
We are organizing that video production course actually next spring. So there is coming opportunity to try to make these films.
Yes, the affordances of digital technology for storytelling, I think, are huge.
Yes.
Yes. And for the
Yes.
children and young people of today,
Yes.
for whom it is important.
Yes. We
Yeah.
have also pilots just finished the project where we had 3 artists, composer and visual artist and also a writer. And we had courses for teachers to work with digital stories and have these all aspects of creating and telling important stories.
Yes.
And the teachers were doing their own digital stories, and they're so fascinating. And now they are continuing with the students, and it's very good tool. So to have these different aspects of expressing themselves, and also when we are thinking about the classroom and different ways of learning and reacting and working. It's very interesting.
Yes, like the multimodal.
Yes.
You have the voice and you have the music and you have the visuals and you have the text and the movements. So, and it can all be included. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to ask Lois something? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment because I want to thank you as well with the presentation and kind of challenge about university and kasvatustyön and that I think this is something that everyone here during these days should have been listening, and if any one of you could have held the keynote speech. So I was kind of expecting it when I came here, and I was disappointed. But now I'm glad I'm at least here for half an hour. But I would really like to hear more.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, totally. Yes. That's a very important point, and we're going to keep that in mind as we have adult education days after or in 2019, a big, happening here at the University of Lapland. So we will give more space and more visibility to these topics here. Yes, certainly.
Yes.
I believe it's connected to the experience I've had in Utsuyoki, Kouro, Utsuyo and Kouro, the elementary school in Utsuyoki. We have one student actually doing her practical training, and I was asked to take a video of certain activity in the village, which is about, we call the reindeer roundup. So that happens only once in or twice in a year. But that time was the only time, 2 weeks of time. When they go, these young children, age from 9 to 16 or 17 something, they all go to the far away from the village, about an hour, and staying there about 2 weeks, having not class any classes. So what teachers came out, the idea was they bring some kind of learning material into this place. So there was one expression that from Canada that we said was a place-based learning. So maybe that kind of concept can be more in a more structural way. We can develop also in the Sami community, because what I found was it was not very structured curriculum, because the teachers are kind of newly developed this activity for students, because they worry that these young children miss all the, of course if they're happy not to be in the school sometimes, but they were worrying about the missing all the important courses like mathematics, language, history. So they bring all different course materials, and they can do it with the family, and they record the voice of the old Sami herder idea about what is going on in the season, what is important lessons, and what kind of reindeers they have, so they also connect to the biology. So since these teachers has only iPhone, so what they can do is take some pictures and mostly voice, so interview of the students. But I still was very surprised by this idea connecting to this topic with this very traditional way of living. I think that's something that gave me the idea that we can really discuss different things from art. And
You've almost captured everything that everybody has said. You've captured the land-based learning, you've captured the digital, you've captured the art, you've captured the importance.
And one more art was there too. In this place, small cabin that the people from Helsinki, some southern area, so there was some business people who supported this cabin. They built a small cabin as a school. They normally use it as a cottage, but this is called. They have this picture of reindeers, different shape of the reindeer antlers, and that's very, very artistic. And children are aware of this antlers shape, and they recognize which type of reindeers they are. It was like a surprising for me. That's very, very artistic itself, and we have never imagined that how many kind of reindeers they have, but children know that because they learn from them.
And I think Piki, you wanted to respond to that?
Yes. I want to tell that our master thesis student Mari-Hinka Länsman is researching now that school system, so we are waiting for results now in next year. Yes, that was my comment.
I think what you said is very important, and being able to bring who I am into the curriculum for any people is very important. when you're dealing with a marginalized group or a minority or people who have a history of oppression or assimilation, we have to be very careful we don't just send students to take pictures and do projects. We have to engage with the community in a way that we're sure we have permission to do that. And because then you're still taking information from people and using for a purpose that may not be in their interest. So what you said was very respectful, very healthy. But there's a piece to that we have to be careful of. And,
I think I feel, I stayed 4 days.
Yeah.
I think only the last day I felt comfortable with the people.
Yeah.
Taking this video and pictures.
Yeah.
They already gave me
Yeah.
the permission, but yeah, as you said, it was very, it was not very natural when they did.
The question is always, am I empowering others? You know, am I enabling them? And am I following their lead? You know, it's a, and because education has to be about emancipation. You know? It's not about nationalism. It's about emancipation. We create good citizens that way.
Yeah. And it's not always easy to differentiate between different purposes. So you have to. I think it's been a fantastic session. I think it's been very, very rich. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I can see from the responses that we've got from the people in the room that everybody has really enjoyed and appreciated this. So thank you very much to the speakers. Thank you very much indeed. Give a round of applause.